While on his Italian journey, the Prince of Poets, Goethe, reached Torbole on the 12th of September 1786 and noted in his diary, "I might have been in Verona this evening, but a magnificent natural phenomenon was in my vicinity. Lake Garda, a splendid spectacle, which I did not want to miss, and now I am nobly rewarded for my detour." After 5 o'clock, I started from Roveredo, up a side valley, which still pours its waters into the river Etch. After ascending this, you come to a tremendous rocky bar, which you must cross before descending to the lake. On descending, you come to a little village on the northern end of the lake, with a small port, or rather a landing place, which is called Torbole. A door opens from the chamber in which I sit into the courtyard below. Before this, I have moved my desk before and made a rough sketch of the prospect. The next morning, he continued towards Malcesine. Delighted, Goethe describes the large greenhouses, luminae, on the opposite shore, in which lemons were grown. At 3 o'clock this morning, I started from Torbole with 2 rowers. At first, the wind was so favourable that we put up the sails. The morning was cloudy but fine, and perfectly calm at daybreak. We passed Limone, the mountain gardens of which, laid out terrace fashion and planted with lemon trees, have a neat and rich appearance. He continues with a quotation, "Fluctibus et fremito resonans venace merino." This is the first Latin verse, the subject of which stood visibly before me. And now, with the wind blowing stronger and the lake casting loftier billows against the little harbour, it is just as true as it was hundreds of years ago. Much indeed has changed, but the wind still roars about the lake, the aspect of which gains even greater glory from a line of Virgil. But what so fascinated Goethe here while on his Italian journey, and what subsequently appeared as a postcard image, was without a doubt the deep impression of an especially charming landscape and architecture that continued to attract and inspire numerous poets, musicians and artists. We only have to recall the highly atmospheric watercolour of Castel Arco, with its beautifully executed olive trees, created here in 1495 by Albrecht Dürer and nowadays in the Louvre. Thus we see a new way of travelling emerge from the middle of the 19th century. Spa tourism, which gradually began to establish itself in locations favoured by the climate, such as at Navan and on Lake Garda. The press of the time featured increasingly enticing reports of various resorts on the southern slopes of the Alps that were regularly visited by famous guests. On the southern boundary of the Austrian Empire, not far from Riva, the emperor's cousin, Archduke Albert of Austria, had settled at Arco to enjoy its mild climate. By 1870, there was a renowned lung sanatorium here, using traditional methods, a popular destination for crowned heads and wealthy clients in the colder months. In contrast to Arco, Riva, on the northern shore of the lake, promoted itself as a pure climate resort, a place where visitors were not at risk of exposure to any contagious disease. In the course of these medical developments, the Viennese physician Christoph von Hartungen also recognized the climatic and environmental benefits of a site at Riva, which inspired his dream to create here a modern reforming sanatorium with the aim of continuing the medical achievements of his ancestors. Concerned in particular for his wife Clara, née Winter, who suffered from tuberculosis, Christoph IV decided in 1888 to move to Riva and work there as a doctor, a bold departure for new medical shores. In the sanatorium prospectus for 1913, his son, Dr. Erhard II, explained his decision to opt for Riva instead of the nearby Arco. A place that had for decades mainly cared for those with chest ailments and tuberculosis, and was thus riddled with disease, could hardly be given consideration. Still less a place that, with its huge influx of patients, noisy social gatherings, loud recreational establishments, forced conventional relationships, theatres and concerts, would overly excite the weak nerves of those in need of rest, and therefore demand more than it offered. Dr. Christoph von Hartungen recognized that, by drawing on homeopathy as well as on conventional hygiene and dietetics, there lay dormant and unimagined yet vast healing potential, especially in the form of holistic and ecologically oriented treatments. As an aside, the doctor also practiced health education, using presentations and the magazines he published to call for moral, ethical, and social change of consciousness. His medical and hygienic demands, especially his 1886 publication, A Call to Workers and Owners, warning of the impoverishment and misery of the masses, caused a stir. This provocative notion turned out to be particularly gratifying, as it distinguished the sanatorium from the healers, charlatans, and amateurs, who were an oft-lamented evil. The decision to open a sanatorium on the border between the Italian and Germanic cultures, at the very southern tip of the empire, was soon crowned by considerable social and economic success in the subsequent Belle Epoque and up until the outbreak of the First World War. Stefan Simoni's oil painting of the time, the Dogana Vecchia with Riva, is proof of this interest. The elegant health resort, with its villas and spacious parks on the lakeside, quickly became a renowned centre for the naturopathic reform movement. He first began his activities in Riva, on the edge of the old town, in the little villa Cristoforo I. In an advertisement we read, Sanatorium Dr. von Hartungen, Riva, on Lake Garda, for the less and more seriously ill, convalescents and those seeking rest, with all remedies for the physical and dietary healing process, especially suitable as a winter resort and transition station, tuberculosis accepted. Brochures available on request. Exclusive social circles were in fact already following the new zeitgeist that saw the foundations of healthy living in naturopathic medicine, hygiene, water cures, and diet. In addition to this stance, geared to the well-being of the physis, they also harked back to the idea of mens sana in corpore sano. Tuberculosis was rife towards the end of the 19th century, especially in urban areas. While even the rich and famous were not safe from this contagious disease, the devastating effects were naturally more bearable than those well off. Yet it was this very layer of society, now frequenting expensive pulmonary clinics and grand hotels, that bore the emergence of the first modern disease of civilization, diagnosed as neurasthenia. The American physician George Beard, in 1869, described growing competition and pressure, increasing stress, isolation, and individualization as the triggers. Doctors of the time used the term neurasthenia to classify all forms of depression and psychosomatic disorders. Its occurrence immediately made it the fashionable disease of the fin de siècle and of this nervous age par excellence, with a jaded society promptly advised to never halt, never hurry, lest neurasthenia soon be your worry. Thomas Mann wrote in January 1906 to his brother Heinrich, who was recuperating at the von Hartungen Sanatorium in Riva. My entire neurasthenia has concentrated more and more on my stomach, which is also acting ever more sensitively with increasing caution. Today, following the shore road in Riva towards Torbole, we are surprised by the street signs dedicated to such illustrious personages as Hermann Sudermann, Friedrich Nietzsche, Rainer Maria Rilke, the brothers Heinrich and Thomas Mann, Franz Kafka, and the physician Dr Christoph von Hartungen, the founder of the well-known celebrity Sanatorium at Riva. Dr Christoph von Hartungen, who was born in 1849 in Vienna and who died in 1917 in Terlan, near Bozen, was a scion of a medical dynasty from the town of Römhild in Thuringia, Germany, which during the last 200 years or so has produced a total of 16 physicians over 7 generations. The foundations had already been laid in the 18th century by the brothers Friedrich and Christoph I Hartung, who had studied medicine at the Imperial Josephine Academy in Vienna. Christoph I, who lived from 1779 to 1853, was a devoted disciple of Samuel Hahnemann, the founder of homeopathy, and served as senior military officer in the Lombardo-Venetian kingdom. In addition to his birth certificate, issued in Römhild in 1807, there exists a particularly vivid image from his Milan period, dating back to 1836, showing himself and his wife surrounded by their 12 children. As thanks for his selfless and hugely successful medical work, in 1843, the political and social representatives of Lombardy had the engraver Broggi, a member of the famous Brera Art Academy of Milan, design portrait medals of von Hartungen that were then cast in gold, silver and bronze. Dr Christoph I Hartung received his greatest and longest-lasting recognition as a doctor, however, in 1841 through his sensationally successful treatment of Field Marshal von Radetzky, whose allopathic doctors had by then given up hope. Dr Hartung actually managed, with homeopathic medicines and a degree of luck, to cure the Field Marshal of a malignant tumour in the inner corner of his left eye. A delightfully fine watercolour drawing from the year 1841 shows the healing process of Radetzky's eye disease. This beautiful work is signed with the words Fecit Dr. Christoph Hartung. Upon his recommendation, in 1842, Dr. Christoph I Hartung was appointed Radetzky's personal physician by Emperor Ferdinand of Austria. Finally, the 1857 portrait in oils by the well-known Viennese painter Wilhelm Richter, and a replica in silver by the Viennese jeweller Klinkosch of the statue of Field Marshal Radetzky on horseback, designed by Caspar von Zumbusch, which stands in front of the former War Ministry on the Stubenring in Vienna, are reminiscent of this illustrious patient. The richly stocked homeopathic pharmacy of Dr. Christoph I Hartung also survives from those eventful days. In then contemporary style, completely intact, it offers interesting insights into the beginnings of the gradually increasing packaging of pharmacological preparations, as well as of the everyday medical treatments of the time. In recognition of his contributions to homeopathy, in 1843, Samuel Hahnemann sent him his portrait bust from Paris, designed by David Daguerre and cast in bronze in 1835, and his portrait cut in carnelian, later depicted in gold on the Hartung ring. On account of his services to medicine, in 1867, Emperor Franz Joseph I elevated his son, Dr. Erhard I Hartung, and all his descendants to the title of von Hartungen in the hereditary peerage. The letter confirming his accession to the nobility, signed by the emperor, describes and illustrates the Hartungen coat of arms in detail. In recognition of the doctor's importance and loyalty to the House of Habsburg, the upper part features the Aesculapian snake with a medicinal herb in its mouth, while the lower part depicts the Austrian double-headed eagle on the imperial yellow and black. Dr. Christoph I Hartung died in 1853. Numerous beautiful objects, images and documents from this period have remained in the family. All of today's Hartungen residences have one thing in common. They reflect a successful family that knew how to balance its many talents. The awards, recognitions and memorabilia thus all gradually increased in number. Here can be found a personal desk with inkwell from the Riva Sanatorium, as well as an oil painting of Andreas Hofer by Franz von Hartungen. As thanks for their successful interventions, Christoph IV and Erhard II von Hartungen received from Franz von Hartungen a previously unpublished self-portrait, as well as a drawing of the head of a peasant from the Ulten Valley by Albin Egger-Mintz, along with a carbon red chalk sketch depicting the famous reaper. Miscellaneous cutlery and porcelain items from the sanatorium have also been preserved. When Clara Josefa, wife of the sanatorium's founder, died of tuberculosis in Riva in 1893, aged just 34, she was solemnly buried in the family vault at the cemetery in nearby Arco. Her untimely death sadly prevented her from witnessing the growing importance of the sanatorium locally during the Belle Epoque, which was heavily influenced by Christoph IV and their sons, the physicians Erhard II and Christoph V. From now on, Christoph IV dedicated himself entirely to the expansion of his medical facilities into a therapy center for neurasthenic ailments, metabolic disorders, cardiovascular and lung diseases. The treatment involved atmospheric, dietary and hydriatic cures, with a focus on the recommendations of the famous priest Sebastian Kneipp, who wrote to him, What is curable can be cured with water if the water is appropriately applied. The establishment consisted of 3 villas, Cristoforo I, II and III. The lakeside grounds were separated from the Verone stream with a wall, and a small Greek temple was erected on the beach. In 1906, his son Erhard married Eva von Arnim, a grandniece of Chancellor Otto von Bismarck, at Kröchlendorf Castle in the Uckermark. In the same year, Erhard began the construction of the new main building of the Villa Bel Riguardo, directly on the lakeside. In 1907, Christoph IV handed over the running of the sanatorium to his oldest son, who had completed his medical training in Vienna at the age of 23. From now on, the establishment became the Sanatorium Dr. von Hartungen Limited. The interior was influenced by the new style of the time and combined upper-class home decor with Art Nouveau elements. Guests ate together in the spacious dining room. In 1909, further additions resulted in a complete shift of the sanatorium to the lake shore. This new structure was centered on the new hydrotherapy facility and 20 air cabins, each for 2 persons, located directly on the beach. In his 2011 book, Zauberberg Riva, The Riva Magic Mountain, Willi Jasper writes, "The Villa Bel Riguardo was not merely a spa facility. The side wing also offered a maximum of 50 guests, all the benefits of a luxury hotel, including southwards views of the lake from almost every room, electric lighting, central heating, a music room, a conversation room, library, workrooms and games tables. In the entrance hall, guests were greeted by a depiction of Lake Garda by the famous German painter Hans Lietzmann. For the season from May to October 1909, some 300 guests were booked in at the exclusive sanatorium for 4 to 6 week spa treatments. Room rates, including the cure, were between 77 and 175 crowns. Christoph IV von Hartungen died on the 15th of April 1917 in Tellern, South Tyrol, treating wounded soldiers to the end. Heinrich Mann arranged the cremation of his friend in Munich, as his sons Erhard and Christel were serving as doctors at the front. The urn containing his ashes was placed in the Hartungen family crypt in Arco. In his last novel, The Breath, published in 1949, Heinrich Mann provides his doctor friend with another literary monument. They see the system as a person in the form of the man who once taught them about it. Around 50, with a short white beard, sometimes a rustic, sometimes an elegant Viennese doctor, a womanizer, like many a genius of his kind. While he can be terribly dejected, he is fundamentally cheerful. He was the man who taught breathing, certain of his knowledge of the agitations of the centre of the physique. In 1909, Franz Kafka stayed for the first time at the sanatorium in Riva. A photo shows him together with Otto Brod, brother of the writer Max Brod, who wrote a 1937 biography of Kafka. Max Brod probably inspired him to travel to Riva, with the idea of making a journey together, producing competing essays that would gradually awaken Kafka from his literary lethargy. As Kafka returned once more to Riva from Prague, via Trieste, Venice and Desenzano, on the 22nd of September 1913, he was severely depressed and described his feelings of loneliness, despair and aimlessness thus: "I feel in all of my being empty and meaningless, even in how I sense my unhappiness." The two doctors, Erhard II and Christoph V von Hartungen, warmly welcomed him to the sanatorium. As director of the spa, Erhard II had received information about the precarious nervous state of the patient via his self-portrayal, and recommended he adopt an all-round cure involving diet, air and water cures, gymnastics and regular rowing. Kafka, who just wanted to relax in Riva, took a lakeside air cabin. Somewhat annoyed, he reported to Prague that he was living in a wretched shack on the lake with a long jetty into the water, which at least let him be there alone and lounge about shamelessly. Kafka's condition improved, and he said in a letter to his Prague friend Felix Welch, "If I had only the slightest hope that it would help a little, I would hold fast to the entrance post of the sanatorium so as not to have to leave." Just a few days later, he wrote that he had recovered his peace of mind in the sanatorium. He also tells of a trip to Malcesine and recounts that he experienced a similar adventure to that of Goethe in 1786, who so finely described the light, air, colours and his mood while at the lake. Kafka's memories of Riva are reflected in his story, The Hunter Gracchus. According to Jan Bürger, Kafka found the ambiance among the nervous patients in the Riva sanatorium, who had voluntarily given up such stimulants as coffee, tobacco and alcohol, to be erotically charged. Thomas and Heinrich Mann repeatedly took the cure in the Hartungen sanatorium because they were friends with the doctor brothers Erhard and Christel. Heinrich Mann expresses his appreciation for their father Christoph IV as follows: "He is a real doctor, thus a very rare species. A personality who feels for others, sharing on all sides, uplifting, supportive, who is satisfied by the sense of his achievements. He will ravish you mentally in Viennese style with his benumbing kindness, so that you can no longer think of your illness." Despite the ban on writing imposed to ensure relaxation, Heinrich secretly wrote large parts of his novel trilogy, The Goddesses, in Riva. The von Hartungen doctors suggested certain aspects of the characters. His novels, Im Schlaraffenland, In the Land of Milk and Honey, Jagd nach Liebe, Hunting for Love, and In einer Familie, In a Family, as well as the essay Eine Freundschaft, Gustave Flaubert, and Georg Sand, A Friendship, Gustave Flaubert and George Sand, originated or were completed here. He also made drawings of all sorts of other unrelated themes. His brother, Thomas, similarly worked in Riva on his own novel, Tonio Kröger, if perhaps more cautiously than usual, line by line. The Hartungen Villa Cristoforo II in Riva was probably the template for the Einfried sanatorium he describes in his novel Tristan. He answered the question from his publisher for information on the sanatorium in Riva in 1906 with the words, "The old doctor is an extremely likable man, very experienced in nerve-related matters, who, purely personally, would be beneficial to her spouse. The food is very good. No alcohol is served at table." The Mann brothers got on very well with each other. Thus, at the end of the year 1900, Thomas and Heinrich, have you spent Christmas with the Hartungens? They often conversed about their fragile state of health. From Munich, Thomas asked Heinrich in Riva to seek medical advice from the doctor. Ask Hartungen whether you can drink a daily cup of the caffeine-free coffee that is now produced with a clear conscience. To escape the summer heat at Riva, in 1903, Christoph IV von Hartungen, together with his second wife, Vittoria de Baroni Berghof, acquired a property in the Ulten Valley. He built a stately summer residence on the Klaphof farm in St. Nicholas, called Hartungshausen. It was of an airy wooden design and stood at the edge of the forest. All the rooms had pinewood panelling, and a private lift brought food up from the road directly to the house. A flag on the tower indicated when von Hartungen was staying at his villa. Should anyone become ill on one of the farms, a white linen cloth would be hung out, and the popular doctor would know that he was needed. The summer home was also open to his patients from Riva. The Mann brothers enjoyed a peaceful stay here up in the mountains, as did the writers Hermann Sudermann, Peter Rosegger, and Carl Felix Wolff, as well as the painter Franz von Defregger. All are mentioned on a plaque on the villa in the Ulten Valley. From 1904 onwards, during the summer months, Christoph IV von Hartungen was also the cure and spa doctor at Mitteleuropa in the valley, which was visited several times by the imperial family. After handing over the Riva Sanatorium to his son Erhard, in 1907, Christoph IV settled in the Burg Grafenamt near Meran, from where he continued to oversee Mitteleuropa. At this time, the writer Christian Morgenstern, now seriously ill, sought medical and personal help from Christoph IV von Hartungen, whom he had repeatedly visited since 1907. He wrote to his friend Michael Bauer, "Now I am once more laid low and cannot restore my spirits. We wish to visit Hartungen in Meran." Both doctor and patient ended up living in the Villa Helioburg in Untermais. Morgenstern died on the 31st of March 1914 in the arms of his friend the doctor. Christian Morgenstern may also have met his anthroposophical friend Rudolf Steiner in Mittelbad, who later placed the poet's urn on the grounds of the Goetheanum in Solothurn. It is interesting that the Turin forensic anthropologist Cesare Lombroso also stayed in Mittelbad with Sigmund Freud. Together they discussed neurasthenia and the foremost now long discredited human genetic theories. They enjoyed taking regular walks together. Thomas Mann confided a poem to his notebook that he supposedly recited on his last night in Mittelbad. One verse runs as follows: "We often climb the mountains for the benefit of our lungs. We climbed the peak of the Laugenspitze with Dr. von Hartungen." The work of the spa establishment in Mittelbad was disrupted by the outbreak of war, and the Villa Hartungshausen was sold in the 1920s. Many patients remained their entire lives in grateful contact with the von Hartungen family of doctors. Evidence of this is provided by greeting cards from Heinrich and a letter from Thomas Mann from 1950 to Dr. Erhard II von Hartungen, in which he writes of his brother's death. He was mentally alert and active until the end, and his death was mercifully peaceful. One night, after listening for some time to his high-quality music apparatus, he suffered a brain hemorrhage in his sleep, which instantly caused a deep, irremediable unconsciousness, without the nurse in the next room hearing any sound or reaction from him. His heart functioned for another 24 hours at an impalpably low pressure until he imperceptibly passed away. In addition to the named writers, other well-known personalities enjoyed the comforts of the Riva Sanatorium and repeatedly visited. Composer and pianist Eugène d'Albert, painter Tina Blau, Sigmund Freud, playwright Alexander Girardi, poetess Kazimierza Ilakowicz, secretary to the Polish leader Marshal Pilsudski, painter Hans Linzmann, who ran the Café Paradiso in Torbole, Karl May, painter Max Oppenheimer, painter Hermann von Preußen, playwrights Clara and Hermann Sudermann, Daniela Tode, née von Bülow, pianist, stepdaughter of Richard Wagner. To commemorate these halcyon days, Albino Tonelli wrote a book, Ai confini della Mitteleuropa, on the borders of Mitteleuropa, with the Municipality of Riva staging a large associated exhibition. These visits prove that creative persons, unencumbered by work or social pressures to conform, could fulfill their dreams of intellectual and artistic freedom here. The golden age of the Arcadia founded by the von Hartungen doctors came to an abrupt end in the summer of 1914. Upon the outbreak of war, the Austrian military requisitioned the sanatorium, which was situated right on the border, and built a bunker in the garden to ward off attacks from the lake. Erhard II wrote to his wife Eva, who had accordingly moved to Milan, "We now have an artillery detachment with 2 guns on the beach, plus a crew of 60 men." After the war, the new political and social order in Europe prevented the reopening of the sanatorium, and the property had to be sold. Dr. Erhard II von Hartungen moved with his family to Milan and later to Innsbruck, where he worked as a doctor until his death in 1962. His ashes rest in the arcade vault of the von Hartungen-Schweighofer families in Innsbruck's West Cemetery. A very special symbolic line is drawn under the gracious life at the sanatorium during the Belle Epoque by Paul Beckert's delicate pastel picture, painted in 1914, with its special emphasis on the family idyll. In the garden of the sanatorium, he painted Gerda and Eva Marie, the daughters of Dr. Erhard II, the delicate dog rose, a motif for vanitas, as a premonition of the impending ephemerality.